Hi, so day 13, and today's project was horrible. Well, like just really frustrating. It took me ages. Most of these projects have been like an hour and a half max, and this one took me like 3.5 hours. Nothing was working. But anyway, today's project is like a continuation of my last one, so I kind of built on top of it. So it's the weather app. In the last project, I worked with doing API calls like on submit, like through a form, whereas this time I also wanted to play with calling data at first render of the DOM so that when you start, you see some assorted weather data at the beginning. Anyway, let's have a look. Okay, so here we have today's weather in New Zealand. And on first render here we have Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch with the current weather. And then down here you can select another city and get the weather for that city and then switch it up. So they're the three biggest cities in New Zealand. So I've just put them at the beginning. So one of the new things that I learned with this app was componentDidMount, which is another lifecycle method in React. And within there, I'm actually fetching that start weather. How it works with React, and this is what I had trouble getting my head around. Like I kind of Anyway, with React, what you do is you load all of your components first, and once your components are loaded, you then go back and fetch the data and sort of like fill in all of the information into your components using that data. So componentDidMount, this method is called actually after you load those components, which was confusing for me because, anyway, I'll talk about that in the next part. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go over state quickly. As in the last app, I've got my 4 kind of starting state values which are used to render this component, and I've added a couple of others. One is data loaded, which starts off as false, and we've also got URLs, which are the different API calls that I'm going to make to get that starting data. As far as and let's go. I'm only going to talk through this one. Cool. So here is the API call. I'm just going to say I tried like 5 different ways of doing an API call, and they were all failing. I don't know. I read so many blogs and different examples of ways. There seem to be so many different ways you can do it. There are some using like a library called Axion, I think, so I'll try that in the future, but this is the one that worked for me. I'm not entirely sure if this is how you're supposed to do it or if it's best practice, but hey. So what I'm doing here is, first of all, I'm grabbing our URLs from state. I'm then declaring 3 objects with the names Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, empty objects, ready for us to kind of push values into. Then what I'm doing is I'm taking those URLs and then actually doing an API fetch for each of those. The way I've done this is also super whack, and I know there's a far more efficient way of doing it, but I've just been, designating the name of each of these objects based on its position in the array. If I have time in the future, I'll go back and do this in a much better way. And then at the end here, we're just setting the state of Auckland to these kind of captured values, Christchurch and Wellington. And then what we're doing is setting the state of data loaded to true. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is this little section here. So when I first built this app, I didn't sort of understand why I had to have sort of data loaded and handle that. And it's because of the kind of order in which data is loaded. Sorry, that's a bad explanation, but anyway, what happens here is if loaded, which is declared, which is pulled from the state.data loaded, which when we started was false. If it's true, it then renders these components here with so the Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. Otherwise, if it's not loaded, then it actually just renders this little kind of loading. So like if the API is taking a bit of time and lagging, then you're going to see a wee message that says that it's loading. So if we click here very fast, you'll see loading there for a second. I'll do it once more. Looking down here, yeah, guess. Okay. Oh, anyway, apologies. That was a horrible video and a terrible explanation. But hey, that's it. Bye.